Good day, Junior Tux. This is Mrs. Tamalon speaking, and today we are going to look at or continue looking at credit purchases, but we are going to add returns and refunds, and we are going to see how we record all of this in the journals relating to creditors. So if we look at activity 3, we record the transactions in the creditors journal and the creditors allowance journal for April. We have to post to the general ledger and the creditors ledgers, and we have to only balance the creditors control account. And then number 3 says extract the creditors list. In other words, compose or compile the creditors list. They give us the creditors list for last month. That is our opening balances for the current month. And they give us opening balances or totals on the 1st of April. And that relates to the general ledger. So if we look at the transactions first, it is important that we need to first look at our keywords. So remember, when we look for transactions relating to the creditors journal, we look for transactions that says bought on credit, issued an invoice, received stock on credit, ordered on credit, or now with the new journal, the creditors allowance journal, we are going to look for the wording return stock and a debit note was issued, or we received an allowance due to the stock being shop soiled, in other words a bit dirty, so we got complained and we got a bit of a discount. So the first transaction says bought the following on credit from new suppliers, trading stock and stationery, and the last invoice number used was B110. We have to renumber all invoices received. Now we renumber invoices because we receive them from different businesses, and those invoices will be in different number orders. So we follow our numbering system. So we're going to start with B111. The keywords there is bought on credit, so that is a creditors journal transaction. The next one, bought trading stock on credit again, so creditors journal. Day 6, return stock for 410 Rand and stationery to new suppliers as it was not up to standard. So we sent a debit note with returns, debit note 100. Then Trichem wholesalers delivered stock we had ordered on credit, so creditors journal. Took delivery of stock that was ordered on credit, but a trade discount of 10% has been deducted. Now, because it has been deducted, I don't need to worry about it. The fact that they tell me this is great news, but I don't record any of it because they've already minused it off. So the 2,190 Rand is already after the 10%, and that is what I need to record in my books. Day 14, on some of the stock that was delivered on the 11th was damaged during transport. A debit note 490 was issued to the supplier. Now, because we issued to the supplier, it means that we returned the goods. So we received or returned the goods, and therefore, because it was not of good supply. So that is creditors allowance journal. Then the next one would say bought a new cash register on credit for new suppliers for 7,620, subject to a trade discount of 33 1/3%. Now we first need to calculate the trade discount. So we're going to say the 7,620 times 3 1/3 over 100 gives us 254 Rand discount. We need to record after discount. So you're going to take the 7,620 minus the 2,054, and that gives you 7,366, and that is what we are going to record in the journal. On day 16, some of the stock was bought. On the 13th was stale, and a debit note of 230 Rand was sent to the supplier. So was stale means it was a bit old, but we sent a debit note, so that's a creditors allowance journal. Then the last bit of transactions, the sales staff informed the owner that all of the stock purchased on the 11th was of substandard quality. The owner was furious and he sent back all of the stock together with a debit note. Now we need to be careful. We've already sent some back. So this is obviously a creditor's allowance journal, but we have to make sure we bought now on the 11th for 4,560 Rand, and we sent back 419 Rand on the 14th. So if we send back all of it, it means what is left over, and that's the 4,070 Rand that is left of the stock that we originally purchased. So that is what the debit note is going to be for, the 4,070 Rand. Then we received a credit invoice, so creditor's journal. And then during an audit, it was discovered that an additional invoice dated the 3rd was incorrect, and the trading stock figure should have been 9,780 instead of 9,870. A debit note was issued for the error. So you have to get the difference there. And let's just go back to the slide. You have to get the difference between the 9,780 and the 9,870, and that is what the correction should be for that transaction. Now, if we look at the next slide, we have to start filling it in. So we're going to look at each transaction. So on day 3, we bought stock on credit from new suppliers, and they said the last invoice was B110. So that is how I know that the next invoice number here should be B111. New suppliers, remember that the folio reference is new suppliers creditors ledger number, so creditors ledger 2. They say trading stock was bought for 9,780 and stationery for 560. So the total of the invoice must be those two added together, and that is how I get the 10,430 for the creditors control total. Then day 5, bought trading stock on credit from Swift wholesalers for 5,320 Rand. Quite straightforward. The invoice number just follows, and we post it to the creditors control and trading stock account. Then on day 11, we bought stock from Trichem wholesalers for 4,560 Rand, and that was also quite straightforward. And then B114 on day 13, we ordered stock, and that was the one that the trade discount has already been deducted. So we can just use the amount as is, 2,190 Rand. So remember, it has been deducted. I don't need to write anything else. Then on day 15, bought a new cash register on credit from new suppliers for 7,620 Rand, subject to trade discount of 3.5%. So remember, the 7,366 Rand is after I've deducted the trade discount of 254 Rand. And you can see the calculation there that I have from the previous slide. And then on day 17, on day 24, we bought stationery from Minute Print. And then your creditors journal is done. And all that is left over is to total your columns. And you will total your columns down and put the total at the bottom. And you'll start at the top, add them all together, put the total in the bottom. Then we are going to look at the creditors allowance journal. So the first allowance transaction said on day 6 that we returned stock for 410 Rand and stationery for 50 Rand, issued a debit note D100. So if we have stationery or trading stock of 410 and stationery 550, the total on the debit note is the two added together, and that's how I get the 460 Rand. The next transaction is on day 14, where some of the stock was delivered on the 11th was damaged during transport, and we sent it back. So the document number just follows as per usual. Roll over to the next number. Trichem wholesalers, creditors ledger number 3, 490 for creditors control and 490 for the trading stock. Then on the 16th, some of the stock on the 13th was stale, so we sent a debit note for 230, and that's just straightforward. Then on the 17th, we sent back all of the stock from Trichem wholesalers because all of it was substandard. And now that is where that calculation had in. So we bought 4,550 on the 11th. We sent back already the 410 Rand. There we recorded the 90 Rand. So now we can only record what is left. So the 4,560 minus the 490 is equal to the 4,070 Rand. And that is why I only fill in the 4,070 Rand in this journal. And then lastly, on the 29th, that was the audit, there was an error in the document. The difference between the 9,780 and the 9,870 is 90 Rand. And then all you need to do is add up your journal. Now we're going to move on and we're going to look at the posting. Now remember, if we post to the general ledger, the rule for the posting the creditors journal is credit the creditors control account with sundry accounts or total purchases and debit all the contra accounts with creditors control. And now the new one, creditors allowance journal, must be the opposite because I'm reversing the creditors journal transaction. So I have to have total allowances, creditors allowance journal, which will reverse some of that purchases that we entered on the credit side for the creditors journal. And then your contra accounts, that creditors control account transaction on the debit here in the creditors journal, part of it is cancelled with the creditors control CAJ on the credit side. Then we move on and we look, okay, and here we have both our journals, and we have the creditors control T account or ledger account at the bottom here. Remember, we always start with classifying the account and putting our pluses and minuses. This is a current liability, so debit is minus and credit is plus. Step 2 is putting in our opening balances. Because it's a liability, it will have a credit balance brought down, and that you would have seen right at the beginning of the activity in the list of opening balances, 87,308. Now I need to post from the creditors journal and the creditors allowance journal. So if I post from the creditors journal, I need to look at for the creditors control account, I need to look for the creditors control column. And I post that total of the column at the end of the month. I purchased more on credit if it's in my creditors journal, so it must increase my debt. So it will be on the credit side. So total or sundry purchases, creditors journal 30,196. Now we do the same and we look at the creditors allowance journal. We're working with the creditors control account, so I'm looking for the creditors control column. And that will minus my purchases because it's stuff I sent back, I returned. So we debit the creditors control with total allowances, creditors journal 5,340 Rand. And then all that is left over is to balance the account. So you total up and you see the credit side is the biggest. That total goes on both sides. Then you minus this 117,500 minus the 5,340 will give you your new balance carried down of 112,164, and then you bring it down on the opposite side. So from there you bring it down on the opposite side, May 1st balance brought down. Then we continue to the other ledger accounts, trading stock and stationery. Trading stock is a current asset, stationery is an expense. Now, when we post to the trading stock account, yet again, I look for the trading stock column. So the trading stock column is the 29,308. But before I can post from there, I need to put in the opening balances that I'll find from the list of balances in the beginning of the activity. When I have it in the creditors journal, that column there indicates that I purchased more trading stock during the month. So I'm going to have to increase the trading stock account. So creditors control CJ and the total 29,306 Rand. Then the creditors allowance journal, I'll look for the creditors control, the trading stock account column, and I'm going to post that total there. And it has to decrease my trading stock because I've sent it back. So you're going to put it on the credit side, creditors control, creditors allowance journal, 5,290. Then stationery, yet again, we look for the stationery entry. In this case, it was a column as well there. And so we're going to post that column total. But before we do that, we're going to put in the opening total from the balance list of balances at the beginning of the month. And then we're going to post creditors control CJ 890, increasing my stationery from the creditors journal. And then when I post from a creditors allowance journal, yet again, I look for the stationery column, or for that matter, it might even be in the sundry accounts. This time it was a column, and I'm going to post that total. That is 50 Rand worth of stationery that I returned. So it needs to minus my expense account. So I'm going to put it on the credit side. Creditors control 50 Rand. So that I do not need to balance these accounts because I did not ask for it. So save yourself some time and move on to the next part. Then they ask, remember now, just to have a quick recap, the layout of the creditors ledger. Now, when we work with the creditors ledger, we work with current liabilities. So debit is minus and credit is plus, and the balance is the final total. And the balance column is always a rollover total. So in other words, from one line to the next, it must change with each transaction. And then your date of the transaction is filled in as year, month, day. Your details is always your document and the number of it. The folio is the journal's reference. So let's continue. So when we do the creditors ledger, there's an account for each creditor. Now you can see we are working here with new suppliers. So I have to look in my journals, where do I see new suppliers? Now in the creditors journal, there's a transaction on day 3 and there's a transaction on day 15. In the creditors allowance journal, there's a transaction on day 6 and a transaction on day 29. But I can't just haphazardly go and post. I have to always be doing things in order. Accountants like things to be perfect and order and neat and tidy. So we always focus on date order. So the first transaction, before we can even enter any of the journals, must be our opening balance, because that's always on the first of the month. And the opening balance is known as an account rendered. In other words, they emailed me an account, and the total on that was 22,450. It only goes into the balance column because it's a balance. So you can't put it on the debit or credit side when it's on the first line for a balance brought down. Then I'm going to enter the first transaction that I see at the top there, the third. And because I'm working in the creditors journal, you must know that I'm working with invoices. So April 3rd, invoice B111, creditors journal, 10,430. And now to get the new rollover balance, you're going to take that 22,450 and you're going to add the 10,430, and that will then equal your new total of 32,880. The next transaction is on day 6 when we returned things, and because we are working from the creditors allowance journal, we now have a debit note, okay, as the source document. Creditors allowance journal, debit note means I have to debit the transaction, minus it off. 460, that's why it's in the debit column, and I'm minusing it off that total of 32,880, and then I get the new total of 32,420. On day 15, we purchased again on credit, invoice B115, crediting, plusing the account, adding it to the 32,420 to get 39,786. And then the last one on day 29, there was a correction on the invoice of 90 Rand. So I was overcharged and I have to fix the mistake and minus off the 90 Rand to get the final total of 39,696 Rand. So then, if I look at all of the ledger accounts, so we have Swift Supplies, which is the first one, and I didn't do that one because it was very short and sweet. So I did one New Supplies, which had a bit more meat to it. But all of the other ones work exactly the same as New Supplies, and you can go and see if you can get them correct. Now they say, lastly, extract the list. In other words, I have to take all of these final totals that I have here in the orange block, and I must put them in the creditors list next to each creditor's name. And then I see, okay, there are they. So I put the name of the creditors there and their account number, and then I put all their totals in there and I add them together. And then what do we know? If we do this correctly, we can have an internal control measure to look at the balance of the creditors control account. And the balances should coincide. They should be the same. And then I know everything was recorded perfectly and everything is working out. Guys, I hope this is not too much for a beginning and that you understand what is happening and that it makes more sense. In the next activity, we are going to add payments to creditors and what happens if we pay on time or a bit early in terms of discount that we receive. And I hope you are excited about that as well. Have a very good day. Goodbye.